Hi, how you doing? Welcome back to the shop. In today's video, we're gonna make this box scraper. It's got this little teeny cutting radius on the corner here for cleaning up the inside of the inside corner of boxes. So if you want to watch to see how I make this, keep watching. To make this scraper, I'm going to start out with this piece of maple. This is about 12 inches long and about 1.75 inches square. And that's the metal piece I'm going to use. It's just a piece of high-speed steel. And I found it on Amazon. It was about maybe $11, $12. So that's going to be the cost of our project here. We're going to make a scraper. And total cost is going to be about, less than $15. This piece of maple is actually a piece recovered from an old table, so I just cut it down into pieces, and that's what we're going to be using. All right, here you can see we got the blank in between centers, and I'm just going to round it over with a spindle roughing gouge. Alright, so that's not perfectly rounded over, but it's rounded over enough that I can put a tenon on one end, so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put a tenon on this piece and get it in the chuck. So use this skew to put a slight dovetail tenon on this end of the piece. Now I'm going to get that in the chuck. My chuck jaws require a dovetail. Some require a straight tenon. Just check your chuck jaws and your chuck manufacturer for the right shape tenon that you need for your chuck. You can see I have the chuck on the lathe, so we're going to get this mounted in the chuck. And I'm just going to snug that down just a little bit. And then I'm going to move the tailstock in place and put some pressure on that so it sits right on those jaws, and then tighten this up. And I always tighten both sides. And there we go. Now we're going to have to drill the end for the tool steel. This piece used to be part of a table, so this edge here is a little bit irregular. Now I could have cut that off with a saw, probably would have been smart if I did, but I didn't, so I'm just going to use a spindle gouge and then true that up a little bit before we drill a hole. So let's get to it. Alright, so you can see I trued that up quite a bit. It's nice and flat here, except for the little nub that I left. I'm going to take a drill now, and I got to drill a hole big enough to accept this piece of steel. You can see here I have the drill chuck in my tailstock. I got a 1/2 inch Forstner bit in the chuck, and we're going to drill a hole about 2 inches deep. So that'll give me, just about 2 inches deep into there, and I'm thinking that should be fine. Okay, so there we have a hole in there 2 inches deep. Normally I would have marked the spot on this bit about 2 inches from the top, right? And I just used I got a ruler on my quill here on my tailstock, so I just used that as my measurement. So we got a hole 2 inches deep, 1/2 inch, and I'm going to clean up this little bit of material that's left over here on the edge, which actually just break it off with my thumb. But I'll clean it up with a spindle gouge, and then we'll see how that piece of tool fits in there. All right, so all my turning tools that are have wooden handles have the grain orientation going like this. So that's how I'm going to put this in here. I'm just going to knock it in when I'm ready. I test fit it, but I'm going to knock it in with a mallet. And then what I'll wind up doing is I'm going to turn a piece and cut some shims to fill up the gaps, because obviously this is a rectangular piece in a round hole, so I'm going to fill up the gaps. So the ferrule I'm going to use is just a piece of copper. It's a piece of copper pipe. It's 3/4 inch copper pipe. And I cut it on my bandsaw to be about 1 inch long, and took it on a disc sander, to clean up the edge a bit. And to deburr it, I'm just going to use the piece of tool steel that I'm going to use for the tool. All right, this stuff's pretty hard. And I'm just going to take off any rough edge. Just going to go around the inside. And they're going to do the outside. Just scrape off any sharp burr. And we can, when we're done, we'll touch it up with some sandpaper. So I'm going to use this piece of copper as a measurement, right? And I'm just going to mark a line so I know where the shoulder of this piece has to go. So right about there. We'll turn on the lathe. And we'll mark that out. Okay, so now I'm just going to reduce this area here so this piece of copper will fit over. All right, let's get to it. All right, I don't want to push that all the way on. I have a hard time getting it off, but you can see that's on there. It's a nice snug fit. Oh, it is a hard time getting that off, right? Oh, there we go. Okay, so that's going to work out fine. And now the next part, we're going to shape this shoulder and shape out the rest of the handle. Okay, here you can see the handle's all shaped up. It's got a nice grip on it. It's not too long for what I'm going to be using it for. And I'm just going to have to cut it off and get the steel mounted in. But before I do that, I'm going to want to sand it up. So I spent a lot of time on here, probably more than I should, but I just really like to have this line flowing nice and even. So I know it's just a tool handle, but I took some time to try to get that nice even flowing line. So all right, let's get it sanded. All right, so I have this sanded up to 320, and that's as far as I'm going to go. Really no need to go any further than that. And I'm going to cut this off with a saw, little hand saw, and then we're going to sand up this bottom and blend that in, and then we'll get the tool steel mounted in this piece. All right. You can see I have a sanding disc here mounted in the drill chuck that's mounted up to the headstock. So I'm just going to sand that, that cut off nub and blend it in, and then the handle will be done. All right, so I sanded that a little bit by hand just to blend that in a little bit after using the disc sander, but that blended in okay. So next step would be to fit that ferrule on here, and then we're going to put the steel in. Alright, so here's our handle and here's our ferrule. Just going to push that over the top. And then I'm just going to tap it in place with a wooden mallet. Alright, so you can see here I knocked that tool steel in. And you see there's gaps here because the round hole, square peg, you know the drill, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to turn a 1/2 inch dowel and then cut the ends of it off so they'll fit into those gaps. And then I'm going to run some epoxy down into those holes and then glue those dowel pieces in, which would then in effect glue in the entire piece. All right. Here you see this leftover piece of maple that I had in the chuck when we cut the handle off. And I have it marked out about 1.75 inches. And I am going to take this down to about 1/2 inch. And then I'm going to take this over to the bandsaw and just cut off the edges. So they'll work as shims inside the handle where those gaps are. Okay, so here we are at the bandsaw, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut this dowel in half, and I don't have a zero clearance rest, so I just got a piece of pine and cut part way through it, right? And then I'll be holding this dowel with these pliers and cut this in half. Alright, so to get these to fit properly, I'm going to have to sand them down, but you get the idea here, right? I'm going to use these basically as wedges to fill up that gap. Okay, so you can see what I was doing there. I mean, I just took those dowels and just sanded them down by hand on a flat surface until I got them to pretty much fit. Well, I'm not even putting it in the camera. Until I pretty much got them to fit and fill those gaps. So I'm going to take those shims out and I'm going to work some epoxy down into those gaps, right? I'm going to work some epoxy down into these gaps here, and then I'm going to knock the shims in place and let the epoxy cure. Okay, so I marked these so they only, each one fits on a specific side. So put a little dot, it's got a little dot, so this one goes on this side. All right, let's get this out of the way so I can get all over my hand. And this one, no dot, goes on this side. All right, I'm going to push that in as far as I can. And let's push this one in as far as I can. Well, that's about it. And now I'm going to have to get a little piece of wood and knock those things in. Okay, so now you can see I had to do that off camera. I didn't have a lot of time working with that 5-minute epoxy. So one of those plugs went all the way in. The other one, it wouldn't go all the way in. It was sticking out maybe about 1/8 inch. So I cut off the excess with a saw, and then I took some acetone and wiped off all the excess epoxy. So you can see that turned out really nice. All right, so the reason that I did the scraper was I needed something to do just that inside corner for boxes. And instead of repurposing one of my other tools or regrinding one of them, I figured I would just make something. So now we got it at the grinder, and since this is going to be a scraper, all my scrapers pretty much have the same grind. I have a 15-degree bevel on the top and a 55-degree bevel for the main bevel. So let's grind those bevels on there and just put a little bit of a radius on this corner so we can scrape that inside corner of the boxes. I want to give a quick shout out to my friend Matthew. He's the one that really kind of like sparked me into making this tool. We were chatting about, you know, how to clean up that inside corner when you make a box on the lathe, and I was using another tool, and I really don't want to talk about how I wasn't using that tool properly, but now I have the proper scraper to clean up that tool. So thanks, Matthew, for sparking me to get this done. And so there you go. How you make a handle for this piece of steel, and then using this piece of pipe as a ferrule to make a scraper. And just remember, you could have shaped this tip any shape that you wanted. You could have made it round, squared off, pointed, something else. You could have done that for like a dovetail tool for when you make your tenons. It's just how you grind the tool, but the process is still all the same. So I hope you liked the video. If you did, please hit the subscribe button. Please hit the like button for the video. And just remember, if I can make this in my shop, I'm sure you can make it in yours. So I'll see you next time in Scott's Mini Woodshop. Have a great day.